discussion about this church and 250th anniversary and talk about some things that pertain to that. And so we'd like maybe to start off by asking Josh a question. So Josh, you were celebrating 250 years. Can you think about what 250 years old might be?
Wait, 250 years old?
Do you know anybody who's 250 years old?
No.
That's pretty old. So, do you think our country is 250 years old? Do you think
Nope.
our church is older than that? I think our church is older than our country.
What?
Yeah, I think so.
No, is it? What?
Yeah, 250 years ago goes how
What?
far back?
Wait a second.
It started before our country became a country back in 1776. So yeah, let me ask you a question. What do you like about our church at White Oak?
I like hanging out with friends and trapping in Sunday school.
All right, cool. Josh, how about you? What do you like about our church?
Bible school.
Oh, good stuff. And Zach, how about yourself? What do you like about our church?
Hanging out with friends.
Mm-hmm. It's a good thing. Hanging out with friends is fun. So when I was your age, guys, we went to a church over here at Longeneckers. And when I was about 6 years old, we would all have to stand up separately and say a verse. We got red and blue tickets, and we got a little picture card. So that's what I did when I was about 6 and 7 years old. Some funny things, when I was a kid, my brother Jim had a pet crow. And one time we were sitting in Longenecker Sunday School, the windows were open, and in comes this pet crow. We're sitting there laughing our heads off. The crow is jumping from bench to bench. Eventually it ends up walking down the aisle, which is kind of silly, kind of crazy. Another thing about church, when we went there, had no air conditioning. So that was 90 degrees outside. You would just be sitting in your benches, and when you lean front, your shirt would stick to the back of the bench. And you get kind of like some nice varnish from the bench. That's kind of fun. We would sit, the men would sit on one side of the church, and the ladies would sit on the other side of the church. So maybe one Sunday you would get to sit with your dad, Ryan, and the next week you might get to sit with your mom, Jessica. So we would sit guys on one side, girls on the other. Think about that. Oh, and we used to go to prayer meeting. So we had 3 different sections of prayer meeting, and one section would be for the Grable section, one was the Longenecker section, one was the Mayhem section. What we did, we would meet in the homes of people. And so for prayer meeting, we would go to a home of a person, a church member. We would figure out where the speaker was going to be, and we would find the furthest room away from the speaker. And of course, you know how that went. We got carried on while the speaker was trying to talk about Bible stuff. We were back there in 3 rooms off the side having all the fun. So that's what we did for prayer meeting. We also, at one time, had 2 2-week sessions of revival and a 2-week session of Bible school. So lots and lots of Bible school, lots and lots of church going on. One of our churches, Grable's church, had open benches so that when you sat down, as a little kid, you would fall through the bench because there was no back to it. And when we had Love Feast, we would tilt the one bench up so it became like a table. And then we had the one bench would tilt front, and you would have people look at each other on this table of Love Feast. We would actually eat out of one bowl. 4 people would eat out of one bowl. You guys would love that kind of thing. That'd be kind of fun. Yes, so rice soup. We have 4 people eating out of the one bowl of rice soup. That was
What
kind of
happened
fun.
to the one guy could eat faster than many of us?
That's a great question, Eric. There was pretty much rice soup in there, so you didn't have to worry about somebody eating it too fast. Some of the more interesting things, some of the highlights, were the time that Jim Meyer preached at our current White Oak Church. I think we had 1,000 people there. 1,000 people. We had the overflow areas were packed full of people, and I think he even had chairs in the aisle during one of his revival sessions. Like 1,000 people were there. So that's pretty cool. I think probably one of the biggest things that has encouraged me is being able to teach the youth in the post-high, and also just being a Sunday school teacher probably for 40 years. So I've enjoyed being part of the youth, also our youth advisors, and I've just really enjoyed being part of the the growth of the church by being a teacher. I think one of the strengths of White Oak Church is going to be its family and the family roots and heritage. Thanks a lot. All happy in being part of White Oak Church. Thank you.
I'm the daughter of Milton and Nancy Hershey. Milton was a minister at the White Oak congregation for almost 50 years. At the time that I was born, we were worshiping in 5 different churches. And I was born on a Friday night. Sunday morning, my dad had opening devotions at Crider's, and he announced that they had a baby girl, and her name was Lois, named after Timothy's grandmother. So whenever I go to Crider's, I think about my dad making my birth announcement up there. Something my father told me a long time ago. We were in the brick church in Mannheim, and at that point, Harvey Stauffer was the janitor. And he was talking to Dad one day, and he said, it's so hard to please the people. You know, some are hot, some are cold. And I can still see him walking up and down the side aisles with a long pole, and he would reach up to the top and pull the windows down for ventilation. You know, in the summer they went up, but in the winter it was just to get some ventilation. And anyway, he told Dad, he said, he has a plan that he's got that he thinks is pretty good. He checks, I should say this first, at that time the men sat on the left side, the women sat on the right side, the preachers sat in the first row, deacons behind them, and then on the right side it was the women according to the men's seniority. Like Grable Hershey was the elder in charge, as we called them in those days. And my dad was the next in line, so it was Grable's wife and my mother sitting at the end of the bench. So Harvey tells Dad, he said, when I want to know if I have everything right, I will check the women in the front bench. And if Orpha Hershey has a sweater on, and if Milt's wife is fanning, then I know I got it just right. So I always thought that was pretty cute that he came up with that idea. And another thing, I grew up we rotated between the 5 churches. So a pretty common question during the week might be, or maybe Saturday, where's church tomorrow? You know, we had choices. Not choices, but it was different each week. And so I grew up with that, you know, rotating Sunday morning churches, which was the way it was. There were 3 churches that stick out in my memory as being a place where something special happened. The first one I would say was the fact that my dad announced my birth at Crider's. My second church would have been the old White Oak Church back on Newport Road. And there's where I had my second birth and accepted Christ one night during revival. And the third church would be the Mannheim Brick Church, where Ralph and I were married. And so those would be my 3 churches that I would be remembering. I have been a member at White Oak for almost 72 years. So that's my memory.
So why we chose White Oak? Well, we were married for several years, and I guess we wanted to both be established membership. None of us were originally from White Oak, and we wanted to have both our memberships at one place for when we raise a family, and we wanted to be mutual on our church affiliation. And so I still remember the first time coming down Penryn Road, and as we crested the hill, I looked over into the parking lot and I just saw this huge ocean of cars, and part of me wanted to say I just wanted to drive by. I didn't even want to go in, and somehow we managed to come in, and people were very gracious, and it was a bit awkward at first in such a large congregation, but so here we are 17 years later, and we're still a part of White Oak, and we're really grateful for that. What led us, or why we chose White Oak, probably we wanted to have opportunities for our children. We were looking for structure and an organized Sunday school, organized youth group were some of the main things that attracted us in the first place. And looking back, maybe it was selfish reasons for maybe why we came, but looking back, we can see it was a God thing. God directed us. God led us into that parking lot that first day and helped us every step of the way.
I can also remember when we were there the first time, we would have had a new baby. Braden would have been only probably just a couple weeks old. And it was very, it was an experience, like just getting to know people was pretty difficult for me being a young mom. But I did remember how it was for me going into the nursery. I felt right at home. There was a lot of moms around me that were in the same boat as I was, and we could just talk, and I just remember that I really missed it once I was done with the nursery.
And another thing, we found White Oak to be a place where the Bible, the Word, was preached, it was practiced, and I've been challenged so much in my Christian life, in my faith journey, by people who invested in me. They cared to listen to my story, our story. They invested financially, emotionally, and most of all spiritually. They saw potential in each of our lives, and for that I'm eternally grateful.
What can I say about White Oak? It starts with Mom and Pop Minute, Earl and Marion. They accepted me for who I was and where I came from, and of course the reason I was a member of White Oak was because of Mary, but the main reason was I was looking for a church that had structure, and White Oak was very structured for me, just coming out of the military, and that's what I was looking for. And I remember sitting in the Mannheim house, and I was home on leave, and Jim Myers was preaching. At the end of his sermon, this is what I remember. This was like 1979. He said, if you ever have a problem, you can call me any day of the week. Right? And it was 626-5555. That really impressed me, how the ministry team would be willing to invest their time into their congregation. So over the years, it was a growing for both of us. And I do appreciate the ministry team. I do love the church, and I do love the people that are in the church. Give me a home for my children so they can grow up to be missionaries, not mercenaries. So I do appreciate that. And that's why I stayed with White Oak, because they have accepted our marriage as one, and I love the church.
Jim and I moved to the Mannheim area 16 years ago to be close to family. We decided we would go to a church near our home. We visited a few churches and in time decided to attend White Oak Church, and later we became members. White Oak was a much larger congregation than our previous church, where the attendance was about 120 people. So it was a huge adjustment being part of a large congregation. Why did we decide to come to White Oak? Because we wanted to be part of a church that taught and believed God's Word, the Holy Bible. Jim and I know we have grown in our relationship with Christ by hearing the messages from God's Word and the fellowship we have with the church family.
The highlight of being a member of the White Oak Church is a great response we got from the people in regards to the work projects that we went on to. We go on work projects, we build houses, we rebuild houses, and the response that we got from the members was great, and we got to know more members of the church, and I just felt that it brought us all together by going on these projects.
Hello, I'm Steve Hershey. My father was a deacon at White Oak. My grandfather was a minister. I am told that my great-grandfather was on the building committee for the White Oak Church when it was built. I grew up in the generation where we would have Sunday school at Mannheim or maybe at Longeneckers. The morning service might be at Grable's, and we would all race to get to Grable's and compare to see if our route saved 30 seconds over your route. And then after the morning service, I might hang out in the graveyard looking at tombstones. I can't say that I've had a whole lot of variety in my churches. I haven't been a member of any other church. But God has called my wife and I in another direction. Brenda and I have been called to work with street kids. So I don't particularly know what this particular week is going to hold. This week might be a week where I spend my entire week looking at cows. Or I may get an emergency call for a girl down in Philly that just needs to have me down there for some reason. And my day will find me down talking to some girl with green hair and a nose ring and tattoos who is discussing the Buddhist service that she was at over the weekend. Or it may find me debating theology with her boyfriend. It may find me with a girl who decides to smack me across the face as hard as she can to see, what do I do when I'm smacked in the cheek? Do I really turn the other cheek? Or it may find me kneeling beside the bed of a suicidal boy to whom life has gotten just to be a little bit more. I'm not sure what my week will hold. But what I do know is that on Sunday morning, Sunday school begins at 8:45. Song service begins at 9:45. Opening devotions begin at 10. White Oak is the solid anchor of my week. In a week that is uncertain, I can go to church and know exactly what's going to happen. Oh, not every word and every thing that happens, but I know that I'll go to Sunday school and I will hear a teacher giving solid theology and solid discussion around it. I know that I will hear a sermon that is solid and scriptural, and I can hang my following week around it, even when I don't know what that week is going to hold. I don't need to question whether the rock band that's on the stage this week has solid theology, or whether the music can really be trusted. I don't need to worry about whether the preacher is trying to push a particular agenda. It's my anchor. It's what I come back to every Sunday. It's where I come to base myself for the life ahead. It's also a place where I can use my gifts. And sometimes I poke the comfortable, and that's okay too. Because it's a place where we can all use our gifts. And it's my anchor, and it's my foundation.